I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing lockdowns, mask mandates, and Travis Air Force Base. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. Hanging in there.
Me too.
Heat coming back a little bit.
Just a whittle.
So they've been releasing bits and pieces of information as it comes out with regard to the fires in Maui. And just this week, multiple pieces of information have come out, but one of the things is the Hawaiian Electric is admitting that they had sparked a fire with their lines earlier that day in Lahaina. However, they are claiming that that fire was put out and the fire that started after was not of their doing, not of their lines, because after the fire was sparked, they shut down or powered down their lines for at least 6 hours.
Utilities are never to blame.
No, they're not. So now they're claiming that while they may have sparked an earlier fire, it was not them. Not sure what they're going to say with regard to the fact that they appear to have been working on lines and blocked the only road out with barriers and people telling those attempting to flee the fires to turn around. The road was closed. So they have a secondary problem. Even if their lines did not spark the most recent fire that ultimately ended up burning down Lahaina, how do you say that you have no responsibility if your people did in fact block the roads and tell people to turn back towards the fire?
Well, we can slice it all up into pieces of the pie because there's apparently culpability or blame, plenty of blame to go around, because you have the gentleman that was in charge of the water.
Right, not releasing the water timely.
The person that was in charge of the siren system.
And that person decided that it was acceptable for them not to sound the alarm because the alarm was meant for other instances such as a hurricane or a tsunami warning, other disaster,
right,
or missile inbound, I think.
Right,
is one
and
of them
according to the former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, she said that they also practiced fire drills with that alarm as well.
And I guess the people who would be in charge of emergency responses were off island practicing their ability to respond to emergencies. And they did not get involved until more than 5 hours after.
I say, where's the backup? Where's the contingency plan? You always have to have a backup. You always have to be prepared, especially since there were already fires, I believe, burning on the Big Island.
Big Island, a few different ones on Maui were burning. And in fact, if we're to believe the timeline that even Hawaiian Electric is putting forth, there was a morning fire followed by an afternoon fire in Lahaina itself. So that would be at least 3 fires burning. Anyway, because there was one on a completely different side of Maui. Not
so
just
was
Lahaina.
the one, was that the second one at Lahaina? The first one they put out, was that in Lahaina also?
So that is what Hawaiian Electric is claiming, that there were in fact 2 different ones in Lahaina. And as of now, there have been 3 different ones in Lahaina. There was a third one that just sparked this week, and they actually used the emergency alarm for it.
Right.
So, but that day, the claim is 2 separate fires in Lahaina. There was another one on Maui, plus the one on the Big Island. And even since then, there's been multiple on Oahu. And if we believe our leadership, this is only climate change.
Well, it is. Predictable climate fires.
Right.
We're able to predict fires now based on the climate. But what I was going to get at is if there was a fire earlier in Lahaina, that would have meant potentially, well, there's a couple ways to look at it. Either the lines were charged, the fire lines, so they could fight the fire, or it was small enough that they were able to just fight it with the trucks.
So it does appear that they fought it with the trucks. It was a smaller one because the water request on the big fire that ultimately ended up destroying Lahaina, that is the one that had a delayed water request. At least that's what's coming out as of right now.
I guess I still don't understand why they can't use salt water, why there isn't lines going directly into the ocean.
I am sure there would be someone who would be super upset over the ecosystem in the water being upended and possibly there being coral issues, sand issues, injuring water creatures. I am almost guaranteed there's going to be someone who says you could suck up the
Right, you don't want to hurt
whatever,
the fish.
the
You
shark
don't want
or the fish.
I get that, but what's more important?
Well, so far, I would say that our government officials have shown us that the animals, the fish especially, are more important.
So things other than humans are important.
Well, we saw this when they required the whole west side of Fresno to let their fields go fallow because the delta smelt, which by the way is too numerous to count, was so important that they wouldn't allow water to flow on the west side. So that was food for people that was cut off. That was money for people to pay their bills because all of the people that worked the west side then had to go without a job. 50% unemployment on the west side of Fresno over the delta smelt as an endangered species, even though it is too numerous to count and not indigenous to our area.
Right, it was a fish that was planted there, just like a lot of the fish in some of the mountainous regions and some of the rivers. They've introduced them or they have altered them so they can plant them and create revenues or a revenue stream, no pun intended.
Yeah, revenue stream. It is a revenue stream. They do make money off of these, but as much as I'd hate to say it, yes, I believe that the people are more important, and fighting that fire should have been the most important thing that we did. Get the water, get the resources, don't delay. But our government, time and again, and officials within our government have shown that people are not as important as they should be.
So would this then be what breeds all these conspiracy theories?
Yes.
Because you have a bunch of them out there now that this was done intentionally.
So you have the lasers. It was done by, so some are saying it was done from the air, that it was a laser focus to start a fire here. And you can see different pictures that supposedly depict the start of the fire, which is a very similar photo as I believe one of the explosions happening in East Palestine, Ohio, after the train derailment, that they just basically took that picture and used it. Then there's the lasers that they can do clear access fires. They can focus the laser from the ground directly on a specific tree, and it's so hot it immediately starts igniting that particular area. And that's what started the fires. Couple months ago, the governor of Hawaii signed some, I don't know if they were emergency orders or just orders in general, which will allow the takeover of native land for other purposes if it is declared a disaster and it's an emergency disaster.
So, native lands to whom?
Basically that they'll go to commercial purposes. They'll take over the lands and then turn it over to commercial enterprises, and we will see high rises. We will see people who had their lands for many years lose them, native Hawaiian lands, to all of these commercial industries. It was considered to be one of the prime locations, one of the most expensive locations, even though a lot of tourists went to it. It wasn't this complete built up area as we've seen in many parts like Waikiki, complete built up area. So they wanted to, conspiracy theory, take it over, and burning it down made it no longer necessary to keep it as native Hawaiian lands, and they can start taking it over. Some of FEMA's own information when they give you help with your property is that they may condemn your property and take it over because it is uninhabitable, and they will give it back to you when it's considered inhabitable.
So what does Lahaina and East Palestine and FEMA have in common?
You got me. What do they have in common?
Well, for their troubles, they each got $700.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
Sorry, your place burned down.
all these debacles and mistakes, and how do we reward them? We pay them $700.
Oh, yay. Thank you for all your help. Meanwhile, if you try to go in and help yourself, Hawaiians helping Hawaiians, natives helping natives, or even locals helping locals, because just because you live there doesn't necessarily make you Hawaiian. But you have cases of locals attempting to help locals, and the government is stopping them from helping themselves. So what does that also do? Make you reliant on the pennies that they're willing to give you.
The tender morsels that the federal, state, and local governments are willing to give you and help you with. Be nice if these people would wake up one of these days and say, you know what, we're not going to put up with this anymore. We're going to vote you all out of office. We're going to put the right people in. We're going to make sure you're there to support the people. And when you start giving any hint or leaning towards corporate monies or corporate entities, we're going to vote you out of office too. So you continuously keep this cycle going. And how do you really put a stop to it? Term limit them out.
Absolutely. They should absolutely have term limits.
Because if we had term limits, and if we would redo the Constitution and only allow a president to be in office for one term, which I would change it from 2 4s to 1 6, and they would not be allowed to lobby if they were going to continue to draw a pension from the government. They would not be allowed to go give speech. I know it's kind of un-American, right, to not allow a person to go out and use his worth or her worth and make money.
Well, because oftentimes it's not about, okay, how do I say this? So you're president, you do your thing, you do it for 4 years, you do it for 6 years, and then after that you go on the speaking circuit. I don't begrudge you, and I don't mind that you would go out there and make speeches. Maybe it's how you can be an effective leader, or what it's like to be president of the United States, or something that would add value to the group that you're speaking to. However, a lot of what they end up doing is what you pointed to, which is a version of lobbying or connecting up individuals for a kickback. And we've seen this with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and it's coming out more and more. Only the difference on this situation versus doing it after your presidency is that he was selling during his vice presidency. And it appears that he may be doing the same during his presidency, given the number of times Hunter Biden has traveled with Joe.
That we know of.
That we know of, because there was just a big expose on Hunter Biden's travels during Joe's VP time, and the number of times that Hunter Biden not just traveled with Joe, not just went overseas. There were a few times that we knew about, but it turns out they had it down on how to hide the fact Hunter Biden was on the plane. He would secretly board. He wouldn't go up with the VP at the time, because oftentimes they do a photo op and then the family will, traverse up there. But instead, he was going through with all of the news reporters, and then when they would end up at their new location overseas, whether it was in China or wherever, he would then wait and exit with, again, the reporters, hiding that he was there. So apparently there is now new scrutiny over him because he was on the plane going to these locations many more times than initially thought. Why would you have to hide that you're hitching a ride on the plane with the VP? That doesn't make sense. You're the son, as I noted. You both are afforded protection. How many times did we hear the Obamas taking their children with them? I understand they were technically under 18, so it was a cool or good or international experience. But why would it? Could you imagine if the Obamas hid their kids going up the stairs with the reporters? That would just be weird.
Right, but there was other dots that Hunter and Joe and Uncle didn't want them to connect. And that was the fact that when somebody figured out the shell companies and all of the crookedness that they were doing, that they would be able to put together the flights and everything else. A couple of minutes ago, I had a thought about Joe Biden and them, and that's why I was talking about term limits and how to control some of this leadership through voting. And I heard people say often that, oh, that's not American, that's not right, because we have the right to earn money, we have the right to speak, we have the right to lobby. Well, isn't it interesting that a lot of people will defend them and say, hey, wait a minute, it's okay for them to do that, it's American. Yet, now what is Joe Biden and his ilk trying to do to us now? Limit the amount of beers that an American can drink during the week.
And we are not equal in the beer limitation. They have separate amounts for women as they do for men. So, which is weird because I thought there wasn't a difference and you can identify as whatever, but that's a side story, a side issue.
It only depends on what narrative they're trying to push.
So now they want to say that beer, which obviously in America is a big business, big industry, wine is, we have Napa, we have many other locations across the United States. You can go to Sacramento and practically hit a wine tasting location on every other corner. Sometimes it feels like. But why do we no longer like this industry? Are they not donating enough? Are they too right-leaning?
Well, because we have another person within a department who is a health official who's saying that, hey, our country's drinking way too much beer.
Okay, so let's just go with that.
But how did Prohibition work out?
Very well.
Yeah, it worked out so well that it was gone shortly thereafter, which would happen here. They start limiting people beer. They'll start home brewing at home, and then they'll have to curtail what stuff you can buy at the local store, so you can't make your own beer.
Right, I'm limited to how much cold medicine I can buy in California on the off chance I'm trying to shake and bake some meth. So they'll probably start saying you can't buy certain things, so you can't make your own brew at home. Would not be surprised.
But we can open the southern borders, let people flood in here. We have no idea who the heck they are. All this other stuff that goes along with it. Yet we're going to limit the amount of beer an American can drink. We're going to limit the ceiling fan that you can use.
I heard that they're not efficient enough, which I thought we had ceiling fans, so we didn't use those inefficient AC units. But now the ceiling fans aren't good enough.
And as usual, there's a corporation or so that's probably jumped in there and said, hey, if you do this for us, then we can knock out 40% of the competition, and then we can make all the money. You'll get all the donations. And I know this is donation driven. It has to be.
Well, that's the same with the electric industry, that someone else is now making the money. Oh, we couldn't make our money off of gas and oil because it's too hard to get into that business. A lot of big businesses have already taken up those spaces, so now they're trying to pivot into something else. It's the same type of thing.
Right. I don't follow the UAW, United Auto Workers, but I guess they're getting ready to strike. They want better salary and benefits and more wages, a typical thing that a union will fight for when their contracts due or when they feel they're being left behind, so to speak. And the electric industry, like you just said, is also putting a thumping on the gas car industry, which is going to put, I believe, the number I saw this morning was 20% of the automotive workforce out of business.
So is now the time to demand higher wages when your business is potentially going south?
Well, to them, any time is the time.
Right time.
Yeah, you could be in a deep recession where everybody's starving to death, and they're still going to want higher wages because they're programmed to think and work that way.
Absolutely. Although apparently Toyota's not wholly giving in, and they have talked about their reasons behind not going 100% electric. Obviously, their Toyota Prius is very well known, and they've gone big into the hybrid industry. But they have talked about why they do not believe electric is there for them and how they are not going down the same road as everyone else trying to do all of these 100% electric vehicles. So it'll be interesting how they fare against Ford. Just lost a bunch of money. They've done the Ford Lightning, gone all electric. They're losing. I'm not sure. Elon Musk seems to have taken over the world on the Tesla. So as far as I know, he's holding his own there.
And I don't know if Elon's companies are like the electric when Tesla's government subsidized gets any type of
They did
revenue.
So they were early on. One of the things that really bothered me, sorry, Elon, but he took money from the government to create an affordable electric car. The first car that he releases, the Model S, is a 6-figure cost car. So I thought that that was a very bad thing for the American public because he took money to make an affordable car. His response to that, however, was that he needed to make the first car so he can propel himself into continuing with his second car, which was the more affordable version of the Tesla.
Would that be the Model 3?
The Model 3. He started by taking government funds for a cost-effective, or not a cost-effective, but a normal user of a vehicle could purchase.
Right. He needed some startup seed money. He wasn't willing to spend his own money, but if the federal government would give him those grants or loans, then he would propel into a really big company.
Yes, which they were doing for many others. So it wasn't like it was a special thing for Tesla. They had many other companies that were getting these federal dollars.
Solyndra.
Yes, although that one they took the money and then, what was it, like $400 and something million, and then almost immediately went out of business?
Yes, and there's plenty of other companies that have as well.
However, if you look at what Elon Musk ended up doing, yes, he started at making the more expensive car, but he still held through and made the more affordable everyday car. And to me, made good on his deal. So he made good. He's not out of business. And in fact, he continued. You ended up with the Tesla X, which is the SUV high end, and then the Tesla Model Y, which is the SUV more affordable.
Well, I have the prices if you'd like me to give them to you.
Yeah, do it.
So as of late 2022, early 2023, these are all the lower end numbers, and they do go higher per model. So the Tesla 3 is $44,380. The S, $96,380. The Y, $56,380. The X, which is that one you said is the SUV.
Higher end SUV. The Y is a smaller version of an X as far as being an SUV, but you can still get a 7-passenger Y.
Okay, well the X is $111,380.
Yes, that's their fully equipped SUV high end.
Well, the Roadster is $200, not $200.
Not $200,000.
The Tesla Cybertruck is $39,900. And a diesel, not diesel, but the electric tractor is $150.
That's actually pretty cheap for an electric semi. I wonder how well that's going to do.
That's a big battery.
Yes. We'll see how well they do. But so moving on from some of that, just what the government is willing to do. Hey, they were willing to dole out. And I would say he's successful. But other companies that are getting into these green energy areas are doing it for the money. They're not doing it for the virtuous reasons that they're all claiming to save the world and to turn green, because the manner and methods of what they're doing just doesn't marry up to what they're saying.
It's all about the cash flow.
Absolutely. So something else that I would like to touch on, so a topic that we've brought up, the medical examiner in the case of Obama's personal chef has come out to give information about the death. I'm going to start out, though, by saying it turns out that they don't publicly disclose most things like manner or cause of death.
At least where they live, because in LA County, because I just attended a scuba seminar about that, 100% they will release. You can get online right now and look everybody up that has ever died down there.
Yes, so Massachusetts, that's where this is coming out of. For the drowning death, it was ruled an accident. And he was the sous chef for Barack and Michelle Obama, and he was visiting Martha's Vineyard from Virginia at the time of his passing. So the spokesman for the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security told, and it was through the Washington Post, that the chief medical examiner did rule the death an accident. And then he added that the office does not release autopsy reports to the public. So it's what we get to know, accident, and we've heard drowning, but no other information. So we don't know heart attack, fell into the water, brain aneurysm, fell into the water, choked on a piece of chicken nugget with French fries as he's paddling. Nothing like that. We don't get to know anything else, anything that may have added to it. Maybe he had a history of cancer and it just got to him. We don't get to know that. What we get to know is what they're willing to say. However, one thing that has come out, which was previously redacted, is that the Secret Service was the one that called it in. Before, it just blacked out on the record of who phoned in that this had happened. So apparently it was the Secret Service, and they ended up using sonar to find the gentleman submerged in the water. But that wasn't released because of the autopsy or anything like that. They just actually came out and said who did it or who called it in. So the Secret Service.
Why was the Secret Service there?
I don't know. They have one claim that Obama wasn't there. Then the next claim was, Obama was at Martha's Vineyard, but he wasn't at the house. So does the Secret Service stay on location of
With
all
the
the
chef?
housing units?
Not generally. Well, they may have some.
If the Obamas were going to
That
come there
stay
maybe
back.
that night, they
Yeah.
could have been
They
clearing
go
it or
sweep
something.
for it,
Yeah.
clear, make sure everything's all good and it's safe. That's possible. They could have a detail that stays back.
So that's what we get to know, that the Secret Service did call it in. They used sonar to find this gentleman, and other than drowning, nothing else, really. So in the world of jumping here, jumping there, I'm going to jump back to Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and one of the business partners. There is the claim of a smoking gun memo that Biden's Ukraine threat, so the threat to withhold the money, the aid, unless they fired the prosecutor,
$1 billion.
was made after Joe Biden met with Hunter Biden's business associate.
I would believe that. And apparently it was against the wishes of the Obama administration, because there's memos, emails, and texting that they were all on board with keeping Shokin, the prosecutor.
The claim is that Joe Biden feared it could come back onto his son, so he did it anyway. Even though there's been other statements that they may have already paid this guy off, or he was the best person, or they didn't want to ruffle any feathers because it could get them looked at.
Well, I saw an interview with him, and he didn't act like a man that was paid off.
Joe Biden acts like a man that's been paid off.
I don't think he remembers whether he was paid off or not.
No, he just remembers his favorite flavor of ice cream every time he goes out. Heads over to Maui, comes back to Tahoe, because you can't be that bothered to stay away from a vacation. Coming out of a place holding a cup, looks like maybe some tea or something. Asked about a Russian plane that just went down, crashed, killing the leader of the Russian Wagner group. Pretty significant political event, you would think. So he gets asked, hey, what do you think about this? And he claims to have no clue what the reporter is talking about, because he had just worked out for an hour and a half.
Really?
Yes. He was busy working out. Can't know that a political dissident's plane went down, a political attempted revolutionary over there in Russia just lost his life. But don't worry, he's got his cup of tea and he just worked out for 90 minutes on his vacation, no less.
And we're good. Had a good workout. Well, the current leader of Russia is making the remaining people with the Wagner group sign a letter of loyalty. I wonder if the unfortunate demise of their leader has anything to do with the new letter.
Right?
And their new willingness to do what they're told.
I don't know. I would think that I would still be killed. The number of people who were associated with Vladimir Putin that have accidentally died.
So I've been trying to merge those two names together.
Well, by the way, it rivals Hillary Clinton.
Vladimir Clinton, Vladimir Hillary. I couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
There's a lot of commonality there, though, that you cross them, they seem to help you find your way to the afterlife.
Absolutely. I had a listener reach out to me regarding something that I said about 2 weeks ago. I believe it was 2 weeks ago on Marjorie Taylor Greene. So I had asked you if the individual you were attempting to describe was Marjorie Taylor Greene. You said no, and then I made a comment that led this listener to ask me what's my heartache with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Really?
Yes.
That's cool that a person asked you that question. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. So my response is that sometimes I just don't like the way she operates. I believe on occasion she acts childish. But other times, I will say I do appreciate her saying what's on the common person's mind. It doesn't just have to be the common person, many people's minds. So there are times where I appreciate that she's saying what she's saying, and other times I feel like it's a little childish. This individual pointed out that they happen to like what she is willing to say, whether it's politically correct or not, and she may be a bit extreme in conveying her message, but oftentimes she is not wrong. And this individual went on to say that if Trump was politically correct, we wouldn't have had him as president. And we would still have about 75% of the country going along with some of the Democrat agenda. And I thought that that was very spot on, because a lot of what people liked about Trump was that he was crass and he would say what needed to be said. And that did strike people as wrong. I know me personally, there were times where I'm like, just get off Twitter and do your thing. Like, run the country. Just get off Twitter. I don't want to hear you say nasty comments about somebody. But really, it got people looking at what was going on and thinking about what was going on.
Right. And it's funny because I can almost springboard off of that and say that's kind of the issue that I have with her as well, is some of the ways that she articulates her position. It tends to make people think that she's not being truthful, or she's stretching the truth, or her facts are inaccurate. I personally have never fact-checked her, so I really don't have a super set of strong legs to stand on to back that up. It's just the appearance that things are inaccurate. And that tends to put more light on a person like it does Donald Trump. And that's the difference in the two, in my opinion, is yes, had he been politically correct, he would have not have won the presidency.
He would have melded into the field along with everybody else.
Very potentially. However, I do not believe that she is as strong as he is, that she could withstand continuous barrages like this man has withstood pretty much his whole entire career. That's the difference in the two also for me, is she can be on the fringes there and skirt the edges, but these people are pretty brutal. And if they really decide to go after her, I don't know if she can withstand what he can.
Yeah, what he's been going through. So let's go through some of the things that he's been going through, because we have updates on some of his cases. So in looking ahead, there is a new trial date for one of Trump's cases. And that trial date that has been set is the day before Super Tuesday.
But there's no coincidence there.
None whatsoever. So I understand we have voting throughout a whole kind of season. And not everybody votes on Super Tuesday on March 4th, or sorry, on March 5th. But a lot of people, the reason why it's called Super Tuesday is because there's a lot of voting that goes down that day, including California. So, yes, the judge overseeing the trial for conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election defeat will be March 4th, 2024 at this time. The judge did not believe that Trump needed extra time to prepare his defense. The judge seemed to indicate that because essentially Trump is very well moneyed, has access to top lawyers, that he can be more than prepared by a shorter trial date than someone with less money and less time or less access could prepare. I guess Trump's attorney had asked for April 2026. I do believe that's a little too long of a time, 2.5 years-ish. However, there's apparently 7 figures worth of documents. We're talking in the millions. One of the things that was argued in this case is that because there's a database that's searchable, the attorneys don't need to read every single document in discovery. I think that who are they to say how someone is allowed to prepare? And if you don't give them the time to look at all of the evidence against a person, and really, in the millions, that's how many documents it's going to take for them to prosecute Trump in this particular case. Millions. They had more than that amount of time to review all the documents to prosecute, but the defense doesn't get the equal time to then return and look at the documents.
Coincidence?
Yeah.
I think not.
I think not. So as of right now, the claim is 12.8 million pages have been turned over to Trump. Asked how many pages that Trump has had access to from before the start of the case, the prosecutor says that of the 12.8 million pages turned over to Trump, approximately 7.8 million pages were from entities associated with the defense or the defendant. So because they were from entities associated with Trump, they technically already had access ahead of time. But those additional 5 million are what is new to him. Don't worry, the government flagged the important documents, all 47,000 of them, just to let him know that these 47,000 were the most important.
That's nice of them. It's nice that they're playing hardball. I mean, they're playing nice with him. I thought that you had a First Amendment right to free speech and to contest something like Hillary did, like the lady that was running for governor in, I want to say Georgia.
Was it all Stacey Abrams?
Stacey Abrams.
Who also contested the election?
Yes, just like when Bush ran.
And Al Gore contested?
Yes, and we went to the hanging Chad and the Florida election and all those.
And it went to the Supreme Court.
Yes, and that was okay.
So why is it okay for Stacey Abrams to say that she didn't lose? Why is it okay for Hillary Clinton over and over again to say that she was robbed? And other Democrats supporting Hillary also said, not just robbed, but stolen. Sorry, robbed is not the appropriate word, that the election was stolen from her.
And I believe we've had a congresswoman in man or two on the House floor protest and recommend they don't certify an election.
Yes, absolutely. They have. And many a times these people stand up and say whatever it is that they're going to say, but they can say it, but you can't. It's one of those two systems. And anything that they can do to go after Trump, of course they will. As we've been talking about, it doesn't really matter what he did. Everything that he does is wrong, regardless.
Well, and if it was his lawyers and others coming forward saying, hey, Mr. President, I think this election was rigged. So then who should they really be prosecuting if they were feeding him with false information?
One, there is that. Or that's not one. That's like thing number 47. But yes, there is that. Or what if someone floats an idea, and I'm not saying this happened in this case, but I'm like, oh, what if we go down and burn all the ballots so they can't rerun the numbers. Obviously, that would be illegal. But what if I say it, somebody else is like, yeah, we should go do it, but they say it in jest. Nobody ever tries to go down and burn any ballots. Nobody had a match in their hand. Nobody went down to where they're stored. It's out on these records. They're holding them to something that never happened. And in some of these cases, part of the conspiracy is the chief of staff reaching out to somebody else saying, hey, can I have this other guy's number? And that is proof positive in Georgia that there was a conspiracy because the chief of staff did his job asking for somebody's phone number. It just doesn't.
Numbers don't add up. And then you add, like we've said time and time again, all these social media outlets that were against him and hiding information, and Twitter doing their thing. Well, of course, the man in his mind feels that the election was stolen from him, especially when you've seen a lot of voting totals were counties where he was up by thousands of votes, and then miraculously, and I'm not saying that it was rigged. I don't know. I wasn't there to rig it or unrig it, so I don't know. It's just what we've heard and what we've seen. And the votes changed directions, which we did see by all the vote counts, in the thousands the next morning.
Yes, and in fact, there is a group that has come out saying that the Georgia criminal indictment against Donald Trump and others for knowingly making false claims that at least 1,043 people voted in the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in Georgia had illegally registered to vote using a post office box. Well, apparently this group has come out and said that it is not a false claim, and that there was a voter integrity project that looked into it and found these potential illegally registered voters out of post office boxes that did, in fact, cast ballots in the election. And in fact, the Georgia Secretary of State and the state election board has opened investigations into some of these individuals. So if they did an investigation, turned over their information to the state of Georgia, and the state of Georgia has in fact decided to investigate these individuals, how can you say that it's a false claim and part of a conspiracy? That is coming from an outside group. That wasn't anything to do with Trump.
Well, their former CEO once voted for a Republican in the state house, so that makes him in line with the president and not an outside entity.
Yeah.
But if he voted for somebody in the other party, then it would be okay to use them to prosecute because they're as honest and as pure as the wind-driven snow.
Absolutely. So in other Trump-related news, we have Biden staffers meeting with Jack Smith's office just weeks before Trump was indicted.
Who's Jack Smith?
Jack Smith is the special counsel who is prosecuting Trump in multiple jurisdictions. I say multiple jurisdictions because they had to move one of the cases to make everything on the up and up, but he has led 2 of the indictments against Trump. And so you have a person looking into Donald Trump and looking to indict him, and then he just happens to meet with staffers of Joe Biden right before they issue the indictment. And by the way, Jack Smith has indicted Trump due to the alleged mishandling of classified documents. That was one of the indictments that came down.
Oh, for doing the same thing that they all do.
Yes, for those
for those documents,
pesky little documents
that inadvertently make their way to a library at a college when you're a VP and you're not allowed to have said documents nor declassify documents. Oh, and hide them behind your Corvette and at your other house. Huh.
Yeah, isn't that just a little weird?
It's equal justice. I thought those scales were parallel to each other. They are.
So then of all the people that have been indicted with Trump out of Georgia, one individual is being held with no bail agreement. So his name is Harrison Floyd, and he's been a staunch ally of Donald Trump, and he found himself behind bars with no option for bail after surrendering to the Fulton County authorities. The claim is Floyd played a significant role in assisting Trump in challenging the 2020 election results out of Georgia. And Floyd is the sole defendant among 19 others who did not receive a consent bond order, which would have allowed him to make a plea and leave. He is also the only African American to be indicted in this particular case.
So they're either trying to get him to flip, or we have a bunch of racists running that justice system there.
Well, because he would have been an African American who supported Trump, and we all know, according to Joe Biden, that can't be true. You must be African American and supporting Democrats only. That is the Joe Biden way of life.
That's right. I forgot about that. Old Joe knows all.
Yes. And so in more news with Joe Biden, Merrick Garland has appointed a federal prosecutor to oversee what David Weiss has done. And that David Weiss is the individual who was looking into Hunter Biden and investigating all of Hunter Biden's dealings, whether there were any wrongdoings, illegal actions, and just happened to run out some of the statute of limitations. So the DOJ has appointed federal prosecutor David Weiss as special counsel so he can oversee the investigation run by federal prosecutor David Weiss. He's going to make sure within himself that he looked at himself and everything that he was doing with Hunter Biden.
All by himself.
All by himself. Sounds legit.
Well, it is. See, they all work together as a cohesive team. They've learned well. They've read several books by Chinese authors and Russian authors about how communism or totalitarianism and being in charge works.
They're doing well by it, apparently. Very well by it. So I would like to keep on, though, the Hunter Biden theme. Not too many weeks ago, Hunter Biden was in court in an effort to reduce his child support payments. He was paying approximately $20,000 a month in child support. In court, he basically claimed practical pauper status, no job, no access to money. Gets an agreement with the mother of his child to reduce his child support to $5,000 a month. Also, apparently gifts her some of his world famous artwork. And he's saying he doesn't have a job, doesn't have access to funds, take pity on me, all of that. So now, broke Hunter Biden has a new house that he is staying at and new rent that he is paying. Can you take a guess as to how much money you think Hunter Biden's new rent is going to be a month?
$10,000.
Not high enough. So his new place costs $15,800 a month.
God, it was close.
Yeah, you were very close. So yes, it was in the 5 figures. So he can't pay child support, but he can rent a $15,800 a month place that, of course, is going to be in a very nice area in Malibu. And then us taxpayers are actually on the hook, not for that $15,800 a month he has to pay that, but Secret Service is bunking nearby. So we are on the hook for just as much money per month to rent a nearby location.
No wonder we're broke.
Yes. So poor Hunter Biden is going to be renting a home for nearly $200,000 a year. A little less than that, and he can't afford to pay any more than $60,000 a year in child support. That poor guy.
Well, it sounds like he needs to go to a re-education camp and learn how when he plays, he pays.
Absolutely. I just find it, how do you claim pauper status? I hope they drag him back into court after seeing that his expenses aren't, I guess technically they weren't those expenses at the time that he said it. But it's ridiculous that he would argue he can't pay child support and then turn around and rent such a high-end house.
Narcissists can.
Yes.
These guys are all hung on themselves. Very bad leadership. Or a terrible upbringing by family man Joe.
Well, he always had to carry everybody and be the access to the family credit card.
Well, think about that for a second, though. You would think, boy, that family has to really have some emotional issues. You have Joe, who lost his wife, first wife, right? And a daughter, correct?
In a car accident,
In a car accident. And the sons were hurt pretty bad.
Yes.
Then one son dies.
Yes.
Later in life. The other son is a drug addict.
Yes.
A habitual or pathological liar.
Takes after his old man.
He follows exactly in the footsteps of his old man. They've established mafia-style tactics to raise money and use his name to do it. They're messed up. They're a messed up family. How this guy continued to make it through politics, boy, he sure has 50% of the population buffaloed.
Absolutely, he does. But they circled the wagons, and that's who vote blue no matter who. When they circle those wagons, people just step right up for that voting scheme. Because anything is better than a Republican. Vote blue no matter who.
I think I'm going to get that bumper sticker. But it's going to have a little skunk on it, and it's going to say, vote blue, PU.
Ha ha ha. Switching over to California, so something that is making its way through the court system, once again, for a different reason, though. So a California church was fined $1.2 million during lockdowns. They are now suing over the government spying operation that tracked worshipers. So Calvary Chapel San Jose is suing Santa Clara County's alleged invasive and warrantless geofencing operation. So Calvary Chapel, San Jose, and the pastor, Mike McClure, are accusing Santa Clara County and a Colorado-based company named SafeGraph. They are accusing them of embarking on invasive and warrantless geofencing, which was in their operation to track residents unbeknownst to the public. So they were using this geofencing to see whose cell phones essentially were registering close to the church within the cell towers, so they would know that too many people were in a location when the government said you cannot congregate during the initial lockdown.
Oh, is that the government for thee and not for me?
Absolutely.
Where was the French Laundry geofence?
And they would never do that. That place is too high end, and Newsom can do whatever he wants anyway. But so the defendants are accused of using the geofencing with the help of this third-party company around the church so they can see when and where the worshipers came on the premises. And apparently the operation took place over the course of a year with almost no oversight, no boundaries, and no limitations. And the defendants could track churchgoers if they were in sanctuary, the prayer room, and the claim is, or the bathroom, but I don't think it was exactly that precise. I could be wrong. So they are now claiming that there was an invasion of privacy, and in addition that the government was looking into this church while not also doing things to regular other companies in the area, but concentrating on churchgoers and congregants.
Costco.
Well, we were allowed to congregate in Costco and Walmart and Target. We weren't allowed to go to church.
I wonder why. What's the rub with church? Isn't it faith-based?
So the rub with church, the idea that you would be around others who may go unmasked, may get too close. You had requirements that you stay 6 feet apart and keep your mask on and not talk to others. Worshipers also sang, and singing can get your germs onto somebody else because you're propelling them forward farther and longer. But I really do believe that they wanted people to not have access to other members of the same faith, and they wanted people truly isolated, because then you could take over their whole livelihood and make them do more of what you want. Because if you have other people that are congregating, they're faith-based, they're growing in their faith, they might not listen to you if they're not worshiping at the altar of the government. They might listen to their higher power. You got to try to break that. At least I believe so.
Well, everything you've said is articulated very well and 100%, in my opinion, accurate. Because I've been thinking about that recently too, because you look at conversations from two different sides. Not from a Democrat or Republican, not from a Baptist or a Jewish person, but just people with opposing views. So you can meet common ground and both potentially meet somewhere in the middle, as long as it's not extreme views. But it sure seems like lately, if you don't believe in one view, you're the one that's wrong, and they're always the one that's right. Pick a language, and I'm not going to transgenderism or anything like that, but pick that, or pick going to church. Okay? Just because one side says it's bad, it's not. Why? Because things change all the time. And what I mean by things, was marijuana not illegal for years? Did we not put thousands upon thousands of people in prison for it?
Yes, we did.
And then just out of the blue, oh my gosh, let's make it legal. So how do you go back and unright the wrongs? How do you push forward and take things that you say to somebody that they may not believe in as your gospel and you're 100% right? One side cannot always be right. It's not possible, it's improbable, and it's impractical. So on my soapbox, I say we need to come together and work it out.
Absolutely, I agree that we need to come together and work it out. And I understand that my beliefs may not align with other people. And one of the things that I had a hard time with during COVID, during lockdowns, is I had non-religious people telling me and others how to practice one's faith, how we were allowed to do it. And I just had a really big problem with that. And my belief, we are called to come together and worship together as believers, and to have Bible studies and congregate and fellowship with others. And so many people said it would be safer for you if you just stayed home, didn't talk to anyone. You can worship in the dark by yourself, therefore you never need anyone else. Well, why would you try to isolate me? And why are you, a non-believer, attempting to tell me how to practice my faith? It would make no sense for me to tell a Muslim person how to practice their faith. I'm not Muslim. It would make no sense for me to tell a Jewish person how to practice Judaism. I am not of the same faith and understanding. So why is it we had this really big push of non-believers telling Christians how they could and would practice their faith? It was, to me, an attempt to break their faith and isolate them away.
Yes, and narcissistic people want 100% control. If they don't control the narrative, they don't control the people. That's why. Because it's not just religion. You can roll that paintbrush out over any subject, and you find the same thing from one side over the other. They want you to believe a certain way. They want you to appreciate people a certain way. They want you to look at housing. They want you to not drink, don't consume milk Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Don't go buy the light bulb that you can afford because my corporation that's sponsoring me is telling me that that bulb is no good.
Right, you have to buy the bulb that I make just because I said it was better and I lined somebody's pocket. Going with that, we do see that a lot. We see, why are we going with, remember the table pyramid of what food goes where? How many times did eggs get moved in that food pyramid? Eggs are good for you. Eggs are bad for you. Eggs are good again. Eggs are bad again. Or milk, how much milk to consume? Well, the dairy producers wanted us to consume more milk. So they were sponsoring how much milk we should consume. Overconsumption, underconsumption. We see it with our food. Okay, so you want to enrich my rice. And so it's enriched with vitamins because people weren't getting enough vitamins. Okay, so same thing, fluoride.
Fluoride in the water?
In water, iodine and salt, because as a population, we weren't getting enough. But then what do they do with the rice? Instead of enriched with natural vitamins, now they're enriched with synthetic vitamins. Are they good for you vitamins, bad for you vitamins? Does everybody's body break down the vitamins, the synthetic vitamins in the same way? And what else were we told was bad for the environment? Plastic straws. And so we saw this big exodus of plastic straws and a huge introduction of paper straws. I know that every time I use a paper straw, I can taste the paper. That cannot be good for me. So I do not use paper straws.
Because it's recycled TP.
Oh, it's recycled toilet paper. So what do they say? I'm going to just move right past that. What do they say now with these paper straws? They may have forever chemicals in them. So we've been introducing toxic paper straws, which are so much better than plastic straws, because somebody said, let's do this. And then we all just went gung-ho. It must be bad. Do it. Now we're hearing forever chemicals in the paper straws. Okay, what's going to be next? Are we going to go back to plastic? Are we going to go to no straws? Straws are just going to be completely outlawed. So that's one thing that Starbucks has done. Inside their cups are all plastic. How much recycled, I don't know. But they look like sippy cups. And then they'll still ask, or you can ask, for a straw. Nope, I'll drink out of my sippy cup, thank you. Although I don't go for Starbucks that often. If I have one, I'll drink it out of my sippy lid.
So that happened with gasoline in California, and I'm not talking about the times when there was lead in gas. When they started converting over to unleaded fuel, they didn't realize they had so many underground tanks that were leaking, and they were putting a chemical in the gas to help with the environment and with smog. Well, come to find out, that chemical was just as detrimental or more dangerous in the groundwater table and in the soil than it was the smog we were seeing in the air.
No way.
Yes, so there's always a balance or a counterpoint, or you have an expert that says, hey, I have the fix-all, put this in it. They put in it their chemical. Then they find out 5 years later, oh my gosh, just like Teflon. You can do research and reading book after book, volume after volume. Teflon is supposedly very dangerous for humans. Yet almost every frying pan, every saucepan, every cooking pan that we have is coated with Teflon.
And we keep doing it.
And we continue to use them.
So why isn't that outlawed? We got vapes outlawed to a certain degree, certain flavors, certain things you can't do. Age increase to 21. Can't do like an increase. You must be at least 50 to use these pans. They're bad for you. And just to touch back on, sorry, jumping subjects, something to mention about congregating religiously. So the First Amendment, among other things, allows us for the freedom of assembly, the freedom of religion. And yet we were so willing to say we're going to cancel portions of the First Amendment for health. And if someone said, I am willing to take this risk for my health, they were told you're not allowed to.
Well, they should have been happy that it was religious folks that were willing to get together, because it's a no-brainer that if this thing was as deadly as they said it was. You let them all get together, and what happens if they're not wearing their masks? They're singing.
Good. It should have taken us all out.
Yes, they take themselves out.
So anyway, I just wanted to say that we had the freedom of assembly and the freedom of religion, and then you had the government doing the geofencing, which is the same thing that they did for January 6th. They actually did geofencing to figure out who was in the area, but they swooped up in that people who were in the area but were not in the capital, and so they ended up investigating, bringing in, and in some cases going through, I don't want to say busting down their doors, but essentially going into their houses, claiming that that person was a part of the insurrection at the Capitol. So warrantless geofencing, don't we have a right to be secure within what we do?
We should be, but after 9/11, that all changed because it depends on who you have interpreting the rules and regulations. Or they will just declare an emergency and there'll be an emergency order and they'll do whatever they want.
Going back to our last week conspiracy, there are more signs that lockdowns and masking especially are coming back. There's statements that hospitals are receiving notification that masking is going to be required, that CBP has received notification on masking. TSA has received notification on masking. There's already colleges requiring masks. There's colleges requiring the shot. Joe Biden has come out to say that he's trying to get the funding for a new updated shot that he would also like to make mandatory. And with all of this, I would say if we are in such dire straits that we need to lock down again and we need to have these mask mandates and these shot mandates, why did they weld open portions of the southern border? They welded open portions of the Arizona wall. If we are at such a dire risk, why is our border
so porous?
Yes.
And you just reminded me of something. We're talking about congregations and getting together with religious groups. I forgot that during all the protesting across the nation, when there was thousands out in the streets rioting, well, they weren't rioting. They were peacefully protesting while they were peacefully burning down buildings and cars and
murdering
on
people.
and on and on and murdering people. You've seen the videos. Yet they were not required to wear masks. They were not arrested. They were not held accountable. There was no geofencing, and it was all fine and dandy, and even Fauci made some wise comment about it as well.
Yes. Good for thee, not for me.
Yes, and there's several hospitals across the country that announced this week that they're bringing their mask mandates back.
Yes.
Because even though COVID is not as high as it was during its peak, it is making a comeback, and there has been a lot of deaths. Hospital visits are on the rise by 20% in some locations. Well, like you said, if that were the case, then what starts in a week or two is the NFL season, where you'll have 40 to 80,000 people congregated in one bowl. It should be canceled immediately.
Everything. So, and what did we see also during the initial COVID stuff?
Fauci at the baseball game.
Fauci at the baseball game. So why? Why even go to the baseball game? I still see people who desire to wear masks are afraid that they're going to get sick and are worried, but yet they're going out to all these massive public places and congregating. I don't get it. Why? It is not that important. The football game, you're worried about it, don't go to it. Nowadays, every grocery store pretty much has pickup. You can order and have them put it in your trunk. You don't have to go inside. And that's even if you drive to pick it up, you can have it delivered to your house.
Yeah, but if the culture is warm enough, it'll stick to your stuff and it's alive, and you get in there and you touch it and then you rub your nose, you can still get it. Just saying.
And the last bit of news that I will bring up today, around a California air base, there has been a lot of land that's being bought up. And at first, it was thought to be, by the way, this is Travis Air Force Base. At first, it was thought to be China that was buying up all this land around the Air Force Base. But it turns out it's a bunch of Silicon Valley people who want to create a utopia. And this is the land that they've decided to buy up on 3 sides of the airbase. And they want to have their utopia to cater to the Silicon Valley tech people, the companies, the professionals, to alleviate congestion, housing shortages, high cost of living in the Bay Area. They want to have this picturesque, perfect area, and then they can prove that you can essentially have a utopia of sorts. What I don't get is why they chose around an Air Force base.
Which is very noisy.
Very noisy. That's not going to be quite a utopia if it's very noisy. They usually have certain requirements that their buildings can't go so high. They've been buying agricultural land, so they're going to have to get it rezoned. So it sounds a lot like they're buying this land and then they're going to force the community to change to their needs because they're going to change it from ag land. They're going to then turn around and need to build up buildings so high around the Air Force base. They're going to hate how loud it is, so they're going to try to put restrictions on the Air Force base.
They're going to try to get them to close it so they can take over that land too.
But yeah, so apparently it wasn't the Chinese buying up land around Travis Air Force Base. It was these Silicon Valley individuals so they can create their little mini utopia.
Yeah, how's that utopia working for them out there in San Fran with all the homeless and all the drugs and all the crime?
Right? They're getting everything that they wanted, and now that's not a utopia place. It's not a utopia. They didn't do it wrong, though. They have nothing to do with the wrongness there, so they're trying a new utopia around an Air Force base.
You mean it wasn't their liberal policies that caused all this?
No, never.
Okay.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.